I never imagined there would be so much interest in Peep sites. So our phone's been ringing off the hook today with New Mexico tags.
Yeah, I think with that, and then just the fear of everybody thinking other states are going to do it, I think a lot of guys are just super interested in it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's been far and away the most asked question of 2023 is what to do as far as the Peep site.
Yeah.
So we've been kind of putting off doing this video, waiting on some other options we have in the works. They're not quite ready yet, in a couple more weeks, but we did get out to the range on Tuesday this week to play around with the Revic EXO Peep. And it was, it went a little worse than I expected.
Yeah, it was definitely humbling to say the least.
Some of the challenge, I will say, well, we have the whole list of excuses everyone came up. There's the actual target board. So I probably can't. Luke, Jake, Brian, and Francis. We're gonna release a video showing some of those shots and stuff. But this 270, 326, 350. And then 450 on out. Well, this was 450, and then a couple of shots at 640, and then we went back to 350. So, like, you can see where to 350, I was pretty well locked in. I felt like the 450 was totally doable, but the target we were shooting at was almost impossible to see.
Yeah.
We were out at Cowtown Range, and you're kind of limited to the targets that they have there. Everything in the 450 range was shot up a bunch, so it was kind of camouflaged into the sand. So the 450, I think pretty much all of us could see the big green bush to the left, and then kind of guess.
So you're just kind of like guessing where it was. I think the other thing that's important to note is Luke, out of the four of us that shot, Luke's the only one that's ever shot a Peep site before, like ever, on a gun. So I think that was a big limiting factor to it, at least in my opinion. I think just experience and being comfortable with it goes a long way. I think that's like the biggest thing we pulled away from it.
I think everyone walked away and felt like if we drew a tag and really got after it practicing, like 400 yards on an elk would be 100%.
Like, yeah, no problem.
Yeah. Past that, the other thing that was really interesting, so I was the one that zeroed the gun, so maybe it's how I hold it or something, but I would say, like 80%, I marked as we shot where the miss was, and like 3/4 of them at least, or the elevation was good, but they were to the right. We did have some left to right wind.
Yeah, it kind of was on and off. The other thing too is as we went out, I think we noticed it was maybe a little bit high, because all of us were hitting high on the plate.
Yeah,
we're missing just high, and when we moved it down, it definitely seemed like it helped. But
absolutely, yeah, I think the zero was maybe
just
a and a half high. But as far as like, once we fixed that offset, then it tracked just fine. Even out to 640, we were pretty much right there elevation-wise. It's just finding the target and aiming. The other thing we did is that the Revic comes with a fairly small insert. At the end, we took that out to open up the aperture in the back, and that really helped with acquiring targets.
Yeah, for sure. It gave you way more visibility in the Peep. It's not quite as precise with like centering the rear Peep with the front Peep, but I personally think I'd be more accurate having the insert out and just like being relatively close with centering it, but being able to see the target better.
That was actually this last column at 350 was, I think that was the only...
That was the only time we shot with it out.
Yeah, and like I pulled up in like 10 seconds, I just pulled up and smoked
center
it.
punched it.
And then you put a good hit on it, and I'm not sure what happened with
Who knows what happened with Ben.
But he started strong, and then it was a lot of red. But I'd say the other big takeaway was make sure your prescription is up to date.
Yeah.
Like I even had to go clean my glasses. Like if you have any blurriness, it's gonna get rough as you get out there. The other thing that kind of changed was our opinion of like the Revic itself and when it becomes a factor. Like we were kind of pointing guys towards like if you're only going to shoot to 300 yards, you're probably okay with a static Peep where you don't have to dial, because the 45s are flat. I mean, with a 200 yard zero, you're only like 10 inches low at 300. I'd say with just the challenge of seeing the target and then trying to hold off, like my new number is like 250 or 200.
200, yeah.
Where if you're shooting past that, the Revic really comes into play where you can just dial and hold center.
Yeah.
And then the other limiting factor, I think, was the wind, because there was a pretty good wind, and past 350, it's like you're just trying to find the target, let alone hold off for wind. I mean, that gets tough.
Yeah.
So, I've over the years, I've heard of so many guys that have missed at 500 with a scope because they didn't hold wind. Like, it's going to be even. I mean, that wind doesn't just magically go away because you're shooting the peep sight. It's still there. Yeah. So you have to, and the Revic is great for dialing your vertical, but there is no dialing for a horizontal adjustment. I guess we can talk about the Revic a little bit now. So we actually can install it with the Gunworks front sight, which is really the best way to use the Revic. There's no horizontal adjustment with the rear sight. So if, say you have a dovetail option in the front, to get your horizontal adjustment, you're going to be driving that sight back and forth, not very precise. And then you can also adjust your elevation with this front sight, which really makes it a cinch to dial in the Revic. So we're not going to use the Revic on any of our builds if we're not pairing it with the front sight. It's just too much finagling to do a zero that way. But the other thing, so the Revic front sight is actually, it's made by Lee Shaver. It's the same as front sight we've been using on a lot of our builds over the years with Peeps that don't dial. It comes with this batch of different inserts for the front sight. That was the other thing. I'll zoom come in here so you guys can see it. But that was the other thing. We had the small open circle. Does that show up pretty good on there?
It's a little bit delayed, so.
Yeah. So we were using the small open circle. I think you would definitely lose some maybe precision. You'd have to be more careful to keep it centered. But I think a one step up on the circle size would probably help with target acquisition as well. And then there's the traditional crosshair and post.
There's like a single post coming in from the side, or you could turn it so it's coming in vertical.
Yeah.
And I think, different strokes for different folks. What we like, you might hate. So I think again, it goes to just practicing, maybe trying different styles.
For hold offs, I probably would not use the circle, because if you're not centering the target in the circle.
Yeah, it's like a relatively like crude way of aiming. It's kind of just like, there's the steel plate, it looks like the majority of it's in the circle, and then you just squeeze type deal. It's not very precise.
So, let's maybe go through some of the questions. Has anything come in through the comments?
I haven't seen anything on here. Yeah, if you guys have questions, type them in on here. We're looking at this. We also wrote down a handful of the questions from the Instagram post.
Yeah. So the first one was, if you have a steel barrel arrowhead muzzleloader, what peep sight can we use on it? So we can do the Revic system. That'd be the Cadillac version. Another option is to just cut a dovetail in the end of the barrel and go with a Lee Shaver sight. This is actually what is on this Paramount here. So you can see that's how tall the front sight needs to be for a Revic Peep. This was early on before we started experimenting with the front sight. I'm actually going to pop this one off and mount the Gunworks front sight on this one, so we don't have to play around with manually adjusting the windage and elevation. So that's the other thing. Can we do a Revic on a Paramount? We can. The barrel contour is not right. The Revic front sight, you just do 2 spot marks on the locator pins on the bottom of the barrel. It's set up for an 875 barrel diameter, so the taper on the Paramount wouldn't work, but we can make a sleeved bushing that accommodates the barrel taper. So we can retrofit this to a CVA Paramount.
So Travis just asked the front sight option for a carbon wrapped barrel, if the Revic, that system would work on a carbon wrapped barrel.
Yeah, so we're doing some carbon wrap barrels with the Revic on it now. We're doing a special wrap on those where we're leaving 1.5 inches here at the muzzle, so just a bigger band here where the Revic can fit on. If you've already got a carbon fiber wrap barrel, it's probably going to be pretty tough to retrofit, just because a lot of the carbon wrap muzzy stuff that's out there is like a 900 diameter, so I guess it's not really a project I would take on, but if I had to do it, you would probably just buzz off 1.5 inches of the carbon, get down to the liner of the barrel, and then maybe thread it 3/4 24 and thread a bushing over top of it to give yourself the room to mount on. So it'd be a doable project, but fairly extensive.
Somebody asked, looks like it's really high. Do you need a little more cheek weld to line it up?
So I should maybe have you run down and grab a set of calibers here. That was one thing in our ballistic profile. I just guessed at the height because I didn't know the number off the top of my head. I think it's like 1.6 to center line. So actually it'd be low. A pretty low scope. This is actually a Macmillan Game Warden 1.0, so I think it's a 5/8 comb drop on this, so it's a lower comb. I didn't notice any issues with the cheek weld on it. And actually, an issue you run into with a lot of them, I'm not sure about the Paramounts. Let me take a look at this one. Yeah, I think you would. With this Paramount Pro 40 with the comb height here, if you went direct to the receiver with a Williams, and then obviously your front sight height would drop down a lot accordingly. I'm not sure you could get down low enough to actually see through the sight, like the Game Warden 2.0, Game Warden LR, Alpine AG Composites, Alpine Hunter. Those stocks, if you go with a traditional Williams Peep that goes direct to the receiver, you're not going to be able to get your face down low enough to actually look through the Peep. Yeah,
I think there might be some confusion. You want a lower cheek weld, not a higher one. So you don't need like a super high Monte Carlo because the Peep is lower to the receiver. So it's the opposite of that. So it's like you have a super low scope. Even though this is really tall, that doesn't matter. It's how high this is.
This is approximately to these. So that's the basic Peeps. The rear and the front are basically on the same plane. So because this is on a base and then you've got it mounted up so high, but I think Josh, it's maybe perspective that makes it look high.
Yeah.
It is a low scope, but this one's where you can still comfortably get into it even with a higher comb. But I would say this Game Warden 1.0 is about ideal.
Yeah, I mean, I think none of us had any complaints as far as like comfortability with finding a cheek weld.
So the other sight system we've got in process that's not done, it'll actually be a no drill, it's just strictly a clamp on option for the front sight. It's using a fiber optic pin, and then we'll use excess sights makes a backup rear Peep sight that goes in a pick rail. So it'll make it a no drill option for your gun, and it also, with that excess sight, it's not as high as the EXO Peep, but it still gets it up high enough to where you can look through it even if you have a higher comb option.
For whoever asked, this will be posted and shared later on Instagram, as well as we're recording it on a normal camera so we can upload it to our YouTube channel, so you guys can reference it there as well.
So we already talked about the Paramount Peep. Hunter Weems asked, these were some of the question buttons that came through earlier. So Hunter asked if AZ will move to a Peep sight option. Man, I have no idea. I haven't heard any rumors of it. That state's kind of moving groups towards stuff. I think Hunter should just, for practice, use a Peep going forward. But
he's too good of a hunter anyway. So
yeah, exactly.
He's a Peep sight hunter.
Level the playing field for him.
I mean, as far as that goes, I think exactly what Luke said is right. I mean, I haven't heard anything as far as people talking about Arizona moving away from scopes like other states. That being said, I feel like states seem to follow suit with other states. If you look at like trail camera bans, all that nonsense. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely something, I guess, to think about. It could happen, you know, at any time, really.
Yeah.
So
hopefully I don't come off as like a salesman with this. And honestly, I'd rather just sell scoped muzzleloaders because it's a lot easier to sight in, a lot less of a headache.
Yeah.
But we had a ton of fun at the range on Tuesday. Like, even though we didn't hit a lot, like everyone's like, "Wow, I want to go smoke an elk at 350 yards with a Peep sight." Like, it was. And then I think it was you that made the comment. Like, we were taking some of our shots at 640 yards, and I think mine, they didn't hit the target, but like I was just off, where I probably would have still been a kill shot. And like, what, 10 years ago, like, who would have dreamed of going 640 yards scoped or unscoped or whatever?
With anything.
With anything,
yeah,
right?
I remember having with my dad, you know, and if you shot 300 yards, that was long with a rifle, like with a 270. And so I think what we realized is, I think our expectations are just a little bit high. In reality, it's a muzzleloader. The fact that you could even accurately shoot at 400 yards, let alone with a Peep sight, is crazy.
Right. And so 3 yards. And then I guess that kind of segues into one of the questions we saw was like average shooter, max distance. I mean, I think realistically 200 to 300 yards for someone who doesn't, you know, if you're not going to get out and practice a bunch, and you're just an average shot, 200 to 300 is probably going to be your max.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing to note, at least for me being like a newbie to Peep sights, the main factor to like accuracy is the contrast of the target. So like Luke said, one of the targets, it was like the same color as the background, so you were literally just like picking the bush that was a different color, moving to the right in the center of like the big color and just shooting, hoping you saw it. So something like a coos deer, where it blends in super well.
That's going to be like 150 yards.
I don't know that I could shoot one at 200 yards with this thing like accurately and be 100%, you know, if it was like in some cover.
Yeah.
Whereas like an elk on a dark hillside that's just standing out, I mean, I think I could see it clearly at 500 yards. And honestly, with how accurate the dialing of the Peep sight is, I think you could hit it at 500 yards with some practice, you know, because you could see it clear enough. So I think just depending on the game that you're hunting and the contrast of that, that will be a huge determining factor. If, you know, it's 150 yards is your max range, or 400 or 500 yards is your max range.
Yeah.
So
we're on the same page there. Did we miss anything?
No, I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
Make sure nobody else asks any questions. No, that's pretty much it.
All right, guys. We'll share this if you didn't catch all of it, and post it to YouTube as well. We're trying to put a bunch of content up on YouTube, so if you don't follow us over there already, be sure to hop on over there. And I think in summary, just there's going to be no really. I've talked to so many customers. Get up on my soapbox for a little bit about customers practicing, but the scopes were like hitting the easy button. You could get away without practicing as much. Although, you know, I still heard lots of stories about customers with issues, and it definitely trended more with people who shot their gun once or twice before season.
Yeah.
It's going to be 10 times more important to get out and practice with the Peep sight. There's going to be definitely some effective range limitations, but even before we went to Peep sights, I was telling guys, really, by the time you factor in wind and all that, like 500 yards is for most people an ethical max, and some people even not that. So the fact that we're talking, 400 for an elk, you're giving up something, but I don't think it's as much as you think necessarily.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Thanks, guys.